Right, as promised, I want to do a demonstration on basic selections in Photoshop. You'll be watching a Linda on this a little later, but it's so foundational to Photoshop that I want to introduce you to it right away. So I'll just do some of the basics. But in Photoshop, you are usually not editing an entire photograph. So, for example, in this picture of my kid, you know, carving a pumpkin, I probably don't need to edit everything or change the color on everything, but maybe I want to make his eyes bluer, or I want to get rid of the goo on his pants or something like that. So we make selections, or maybe I want to delete the background. And some of you have done some of this stuff before. The selection tools are at the top of the toolbar. Well, first there's the move tool, and then the selection tools go from most sort of crude to most detailed. So, for example, the marquees are just going to give you basic shapes. So here is a selection of just a rectangle, and I can, delete it or edit it or change the color or whatever I want. And I have an ellipse, and those are just really basic selections. So that wouldn't help me very much if I wanted to do anything to his face or eyes or the pumpkin, because I need a much more detailed selection. If you go down a level, we have the lasso tools. So the first lasso tool is freehand. So I'm just holding down on my mouse button and trying to select my kid. And as you can see, this is a little bit crude as well. I'm not getting it very good. So I could spend more time on it and get it kind of okay. But even if I spent a decent amount of time on this, it's not great. So if I wanted to go and make an adjustment of color balance, for example, and make him more magenta for some weird reason, you can see it's not the best selection. It works for some things, by the way. I'm not suggesting these are not good for anything, but for really specific selections, you need to choose the right tool. The Polygonal lasso tool is good for angular shapes, because it's like the pen tool, I guess I would say, and that you're doing click, 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 and making selections that way. And then finally, the magnetic selection tool does its best to find the edges of things. And since I have a blurred background on this image, it might do kind of okay. Oh, my computer wants to cruise out of control here. But I start out by clicking, and then I'm not holding down my mouse, but I'm just kind of freehand guiding the selection. And it's doing a pretty good job. I'm roughly trying to pick out, where the edges are. And this one can work pretty well sometimes. So that's how that one works. And you end your selection. You always have to end your selection. You can never just do an open-ended selection. And then I'll also teach you how to fix those little places where it goes haywire. So those are your lassos. And the magic wand tool, I'm going to go from the bottom here. This one picks out similar pixels in terms of color. So I'm just going to click here, and it picked out that nice green. And I could click on my son's shirt, and it picks out similar greens, but it's not picking out the darker green. If I do it on his arm, just kind of weird stuff there, actually. So this basically only works for like removing a white background or a black background where there's a really similar color. The quick selection tool, deselect here, is a pretty good one. I'm using my bracket keys to make this bigger. Maybe not quite that big. In that I'm just using my mouse. Let's try the pumpkin. Using my mouse to kind of color in. I'm holding down my mouse key, and it pretty much picked up that whole pumpkin for me pretty well without me having to color. It also picked up some extra, so you can go up here to this minus icon and say, I don't want that. And yeah, that does pretty good. But honestly, if I were to, for example, delete, you'll see it's definitely kind of jagged and imperfect. So I'll definitely be teaching you how to refine. The object selection tool is a little new. I don't use it too often, but I can kind of say, can you select this object for me? And it will do its best. And in that case, it did really well. I think because the color of the pumpkin is so uniform. Okay, so those are your selection tools, but they don't do a very good job of getting things perfect, as you just saw. So just working with this pumpkin, I think the tool that worked best for me in this case was the object selection, but I'm going to use the quick selection just because I want it to be a little less perfect so that I can teach you how to fix it. Okay, so there's my pumpkin. Pretty good, but not perfect. And I am going to just leave this for now. And what I want to do is go way down to the bottom of my toolbar. Again, we're in Photoshop, of course, and turn on Quick Mask Mode. And what Quick Mask Mode does is it shows me what I have selected and what I don't have selected using a color indicator. And this can be confusing because it's not that this is red, it's that this is technically selected and the pumpkin is not, or it could be the inverse as well. It doesn't really matter in this case. We're just defining the borders. So it shows me, you know, here, this is not selected. We want to color that in. And it gives us the ability to use paintbrushes to color in the selection. So I'm going to zoom, zoom, zoom way in here. And I'm going to select my paintbrush by using the letter B, hitting the letter B. And I'm using my bracket key to make that small. And I want black. So you're using just black and white. Remember, red is not really red. It's just indicating selection. Black adds to the selection. And white takes away from the selection. I don't know why it's a little bit light here. Maybe the smoothing, I have all the opacity and hardness, so I think it's okay. It's just making me color. Oh, and my computer has been so slow lately, my goodness. But one trick that I want to show you is that you can click and then hold down Shift and click again to get kind of a line, and I didn't get it very perfectly there. I really don't know why it's making it more semi-transparent here. But I think it will be okay. I'll have to investigate that. Okay, and then I can just freehand color this. Which in this case is really tedious, only because my computer is being so slow. But I will take my time and make sure everything gets colored in. I almost feel like I have something selected that's making it be a little wonky, but we'll see if it works for me here. This will be a 15-minute video because that's all Screencast-O-Matic lets me do. So getting that pretty good. And then I would go up here and I have to zoom out just a little so I can see what's going on. And my computer is struggling. Yeah, I can see I have a little bit here that I want to color in. And here that I want to color in. And then if I want to take away from the selection, for example, I think I see, I don't really need too much taken away actually. I think I'm here pretty good in that regard. But I would use the white paintbrush for that. Get away all those little bumps. Again, I'm holding down Shift and just doing little clicks. And then finally, the last level of getting this really nice and refined is to go to my Select menu and go to, there is something up with this. I want to hit Modify. Let me get out of my quick mask and get back to my marching ants. Ha, that's what you have to do. And here's where you can really refine things. Again, I see that I kind of goofed a little here, so I could go back into quick mask mode and fix that. But for now, I'm just going to use some of these modify tools. So I want to smooth it. I almost always smooth out my selections a little bit, maybe by about 3. That just makes things a little rounder. And sometimes I will feather just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit, so maybe 1 pixel. And you can't see anything happening now, but you'll see it when I delete the background. And I do want to fix right here. I don't want that. I'm going to fix this. So back in a quick mask mode, hitting B again for my brush, just coloring that in, down Shift, and then choosing white. Actually, it was kind of hard to tell where pumpkin ends and arm begins. Alright, so now I'm going to go back to marching ants, go out of quick mask. I'm going to select the inverse, so Command Shift I, or select inverse. And now you can see it's everything but the pumpkin that's selected. And hit delete and deselect. And that's a pretty good, I mean, I rushed through this, so certainly there's room for improvement. But that's a pretty good cutout that I could have done better if I spent more time on it. You can see it's pretty choppy over here, but it's smoother over here where I spent some time on it. You can see it has a little bit of a soft edge from that smoothing and that feathering. And there are even further steps that you can take to select in Photoshop, but that's as good as we're going to get for now. And yeah, that's it.